Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatam svakata krishnah punyashravana kirtanah hridiyantah stohi abhadrani vidunoti suhrit satam. Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevayam Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistaki. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to be discussing the 19th chapter, which is the killing of Hiraṇyākṣa by Lord Varahadev. And interestingly, today is a new moon. A new moon, which is also called Amavasya, is an extraordinarily tamasic lunar day. It is the most tamasic lunar day, which essentially means that there isn't any level of sattva in the moon or in the sky on this particular day, which essentially means a highly inauspicious occurrence, which happens once a month. So the day of Amavasya, the moon particularly has lost all its ability to sustain, to provide, etc. It has practically lost its luster. And the reason why Chandra, the moon god, loses his ability to shine on Amavasya is because of a curse. The curse itself is because of the fleeting nature of wanting to usurp and consume and to engage in sense gratification. The moon represents the mind. And in other words, the mind takes cue from the moon because the moon is very fleeting by nature. So there is sankalpa and there's vikalpa. There's a constant effort of wanting to accept and reject, accept and reject, and accept and reject. And whilst this particular endeavor of accepting and rejecting is going on, there's great anxiety because the moon has a very fleeting nature. So the mana of the individual, the mind of the individual, has its comparison and link very closely to the moon god. Now, on the day of Amavasya, the moon was overcome by lust, and the moon god, Chandra, he kidnapped the wife of Brihaspati, the guru of the demigods. So he kidnapped his own guru's wife and indulged in forcible sense gratification with her. And then a progeny was born, and that progeny is the planet Mercury, Buddha. So this Buddha, he practically has a greater affinity for his foster father, Brihaspati. He really hates his real father, Moon, because he has practically received a bad name because of the activity that was done. Because on this particular day, the moon practically forced himself, Chandra forced himself on the wife of his guru. He was cursed by Lord Shiva. And today is practically a day when he would have absolutely no power. It's all completely shut down. It is also very, very, very tamasic, which essentially means that there's a tremendous amount of negativity that is normally felt in the atmosphere. Interestingly, amongst the 9 planets, the different lunar days are practically classified and they fall into the category dominated by different planetary forces. So Amavasya is ruled by Rahu, the demon. Yeah. Rahu's head was severed by the Sudarshan Chakra. As a consequence, he practically just has a head. So there's constant machinations, there's constant manipulation, there's constant activity. So he dominates the human race to such an extent that when we become devious, when we become duplicitous, and when we start practically experiencing a great level of anxiety, we are being dominated by this planet because he can really eclipse the moon. He can eclipse the moon. He and his counterpart Ketu, they can eclipse the moon, which essentially means that the moon will have no ability to think on its own. He can practically overcome the good qualities and then impose himself to such a level that the moon, which is the mind, can be overcome very easily. Yeah. So the point is, Rahu basically is the planetary demigod in charge of Amavasya, which is the new moon. That is why all kinds of auspicious activities are deferred. The deities in all our temples in Vrindavan, they wear black. And the reason why they wear black, this is Radha Krishna deities. This is a part of Pancharatra. This is not a concoction. It is a part of Pancharatra. They wear black on Amavasya because in the Pancharatra Tantra basically is how to protect. Yeah, Tanatraye. Tana is the body or the physical object, the Panchabhutas. Traye is to protect. So Pancharatra, which is also basically the idea of worshipping, which is given by Sri Narada Muni. He practically has given us all the Pancharatra details, but then the deity worship standard, they also follow the code of putting on certain colors on certain days. On Amavasya day, the deities wear black. And the reason why they wear black is because this is a tantric color in Tantra, which can prevent the influence of Rahu. Black prevents the influence of Rahu. You know that people who participate in a certain religion, they really like black. Yeah. So somehow or the other, they wear a lot of black. They cover themselves in black. We all know what that is. But the point is that that particular color can afford some protection from heavy influence by this demon. So the deities are also adorned with black. They wear a black dress today on Amavasya day in major temples, including ours. And it is to protect any harm from coming, because it is our responsibility to ensure that the deities and everybody are taken care of. So this is more a matter of us being able to, feel a certain sense of wanting to take care of the deities. So we kind of put dresses on them to protect them based on the rules of material nature. So we follow the rules of material nature, just as Mother Yashoda used to, chant different mantras. She used to basically sprinkle certain kinds of, water, etc., on Krishna before sending him to the forest. And she used to do it from a sense of wanting to protect, because she felt Krishna was dependent on her. In a similar fashion, we also act with our deities in a manner where they are dependent on us. So we make them wear black. Now, different colors, for example, you see sannyasis wearing orange. And the reason why they wear orange is because it has the ability to particularly reduce the influence of passion. This is also the same principle. Orange is owned, saffron is owned by the sannyasi to reduce the influence of passion. So there are different colors in the Pancharatra, there are different colors in the Vedic scripture, which have the ability to prevent certain forces of nature. And black can prevent the force of this particular demoniac influence. It is basically a color that can limit the influence of this planet. Now, why am I even bringing up the whole topic of new moon? Because we may have given classes in the past. What is the biggest coincidence in today's discussion is the fact that amongst the planetary demigods Rahu, to limit and to remove his influence, Lord Varaha is worshipped. Lord Varahadev is particularly worshipped to remove the influence of Rahu. Hiraṇyākṣa is particularly symbolic of that particular nature. All the demons are. The demons basically are extraordinarily intelligent. We should never assume that they are not intelligent. They are very intelligent. And their ability to plan, their ability to basically manage and engage in activity, which is quite interesting. They have great capacity for being able to manage and plan and create alliances and then know what needs to be done. You can imagine if you read the Puranas, you will find that they had set objectives. Hare Krishna, can each and every one of you check and see if you've muted your phone or your computer, please? Can you just check and see if you're muted? Because someone's line is open. And because I'm using an iPad, I don't want to mess with it now because we're in the middle of class. So if you could just check, thank you. Yeah, that's basically, I wanted a mute here. All right, so basically what I was wanting to share is the fact that Hiraṇyākṣa represents the demon, but the demons themselves are experts. They are much better in knowing what is required, and then they are very, very disciplined in putting in the austerity to achieve it. They perform enormous austerity once an objective is learned, and they know what mantras to chant, they know whom to approach, they would know exactly the agenda which they have to achieve, then they would put in efforts which are extraordinary that we don't do. Yeah, we should learn from them from that perspective of identifying what is most important for us and then giving up everything else and dedicating ourselves to such an extent that we're able to focus. Anyway, the point being that Rahu, who dominates the Amavasya Tithi, he also dominates the Ashtami Tithis. You know, he practically was, he is basically symbolic of the incarnation of Lord Varaha, which essentially means that Lord Varaha needs to be worshipped to completely remove this extraordinarily devious influence from our lives. So there is the Varaha Kavach, there is the set of verses of the appearance of Lord Varaha, and then he is actually overpowering Rahu, and that is practically the killing of Hiraṇyākṣa. Yeah. So this is a very, very timely chapter from the perspective that today is an extraordinarily inauspicious day, but then Krishna has arranged particularly to offer us an opportunity to glorify his killing of Hiraṇyākṣa so that we could be rid of the influence of this demoniac personality. Yeah. So all politicians, invariably, they would have an extraordinarily dominant Rahu. You cannot play politics unless you are, blessed by that particular force. So all politicians, they all have to have this, because speaking the right word, manipulating the minds of people, speaking what is appropriate, and then just speaking for the sake of speaking, having an agenda in the heart which is very different from what is spoken. This is a part of what we normally notice in politics, and it's noticed worldwide. And politicians are dominated by this particular planetary force. So the point being, duplicity, things which devotees should never have in their heart because it's highly, highly inimical to devotional service. They're all represented by this demoniac force. So the point being that Lord Varaha is worshipped for this particular purpose. He's particularly, the Varaha Kavach is extraordinarily potent. The appearance of Lord Varaha being chanted is very, very potent. And as a consequence, we have the ability to manage this particular force. We have the ability to basically manage the influence of this force, because Krishna has provided us with all kinds of wonderful Leela, and this Leela counters negativity so that we are able to make advancement. It practically counters negativity. So is the case with Lord Narasimha. Lord Narasimha's appearance, practically there are verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam which practically counter the influence, negative influence. And this has been arranged in such a way that we are able to counter the negativity, and we are able to remove what is considered inauspicious, nashta prayeshu, abhadreshu. So coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam it's extraordinarily beneficial on a daily basis, because we practically not only would be developing sambandha, but more importantly, there really isn't anything else that is required. So we chant, we associate, we read Srimad Bhagavatam, becoming inspired, we serve the deities, and then we develop aspirations of wanting to serve Vrindavan Dham. Now, the point we wanted to make was that Krishna appeared on an Ashtami. Yeah, Srimati Radharani appeared on an Ashtami. Janmashtami is an Ashtami. That Tithi, lunar day, is also dominated by Rahu. Then one wonders, why did Krishna and Radharani choose an Ashtami? Because it is inauspicious for everything else. It is inauspicious. Well, they chose that so that we could fast and we could serve. And this is a simplified answer. There's a lot of technical reasons as to why the Tithi was chosen that I don't want to digress, because it may just take us away and it may just take us away from the topic. But then the idea is that if you fast on Janmashtami day, you're practically removing this influence. This is an extraordinarily powerful influence, very powerful. You can imagine the Lord has to incarnate. And imagine the circumstance of how clever this demon is. He's very clever. During the Samudra Manthan, Dhanvantari, Lord Dhanvantari, he comes up with Amrit. And this demon snatches it away from an incarnation of the Lord. He snatches away the pot. He is very devious. And then once he is snatching away the pot, then what happens basically is that Krishna again retrieves the pot. And he is the first one, Rahu is the first one amongst all the demons to recognize Krishna's plans when he comes as Mohini. He recognizes that he has to sit with the demigods. He recognizes that they're going to be cheated because he is the personification of duplicity, cheating, and all those activities. He recognizes it because he's so intelligent. So it's not an ordinary circumstance. You're dealing with someone who is extraordinarily intelligent. You can imagine in the context of Krishna himself being there, he goes and sits with the demigods. Now, what happens when he sits with the demigods? This is a different story, but it's a good one to know because it's contextual. When he sits with the demigods to receive the nectar of immortality, he is sitting next to the sun god. Because the sun god, Suryadev, he can see everything because he is the personification of vision of the Lord. Yeah, he is the personification of vision of the Lord. So he is practically able to see that the personality sitting next to him is not a demigod. He is a demon. Now the sun god shares this information with the moon god who is sitting next to him, Chandra. Chandra, who is the moon god, who represents the mind, goes in the speed of mind and informs Krishna, Mohini Avatar, that whoever is sitting next to us is Rahu. He's a demon. Now the Sudarshan Chakra is dispatched, and then Rahu is decapitated. So the head becomes Rahu, the tail or the lower part of the body becomes Ketu. Now, what is to be understood is that because of this particular treachery, Rahu practically has deep hatred for the sun god and deep hatred for the moon god. So today is also a solar eclipse. See, he eclipses, he has a chance to eclipse the sun god because he practically has deep hatred for him because he represents light, and the light that comes from the sun practically dispels the negativity imposed on the human race by this planet. So he hates him. So every few months, in the year, you have this opportunity to have eclipses. So there is an eclipse of the mind, which is the lunar eclipse. There's an eclipse of the sun. So eclipse of the sun is today. It's a solar eclipse. It's a total solar eclipse in some parts of the world. So in this particular day, the inauspiciousness is even greater because it's very negative. It's very negative. It's unbelievably negative. So the point being that all the festivals that we perform in terms of Ashtami and so on, they also have the ability to particularly remove the influence, because if you fast on Janmashtami, yes, we are fasting on Janmashtami for us to be able to chant better. That is the only objective. But then there is this whole idea that when you chant on Ashtami, on that particular day, on Janmashtami, whoever is born on a Janmashtami, whoever is born on Ashtami, some of us are born on Ashtami Tithi. There are all kinds of relationship challenges. Whoever is born on Amavasya, they have been to hell in the previous lifetime. Yeah, they have practically done something which took them to the lower and nether regions. They have practically gotten, some kind of, I would say, punishment, and they have come back. And most people would carry a tremendous amount of negativity. There are some special cases which are a great boon on the planet, but that's not basically with everybody. Those who are born on the Ashtami Tithi, they have all kinds of anxiety with regard to relationships, all kinds of anxiety. So the remedy in Vedic astrology, which is given in Shastra, is that you fast on Janmashtami. So we fast on Janmashtami, and it pacifies this negativity. But then our fasting has nothing to do with pacifying the negativity being born on a certain tithi. We are fasting so that our senses are subdued and we are able to surrender, and we are able to receive Krishna, and we are able to serve him wonderfully. So our objective is not so much to remove the influence of one planet or the other, because Harinam is most powerful. We are manifesting Harinam in our heart. We are manifesting and coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. We are coming in touch with the deity form of Krishna. And then we also have objectives in our heart. Most of us have objectives in our heart that are particularly being set forth by the Acharyas. You see, when we have objectives that are being given by Srila Rupa Goswami, when we have objectives being given by the followers of Srila Rupa Goswami, how wrong could our life be? How wrong could we be in our life? We could make a few mistakes and there could be suffering. Yeah. But then how wrong and how off target could we be when the objectives that we have in our heart are coming down disciplic succession right from Lord Chaitanya, and those objectives have become dear to us. We practically dedicate ourselves in different ways. There are certain times when we go through what we would call as lack of faith, we are overpowered by circumstances. But then it's not all the time, and we have to realize that Krishna is very, very careful in taking into account who we are and the challenges we face. He can see everything. So as a consequence, he accounts for the times when we are weak. He accounts for the times when we are powerful. He has a very consolidated, what I would call as a consolidated view of who we are. So it is basically a very wholesome view. It's holistic. He doesn't really take one negative and dwell on it. He doesn't do that. He takes a view as to predominantly what is our nature, predominantly what are we focused on over a certain period of time. This is Krishna's idea. He practically focuses on the overall ability of a devotee to move in a certain direction and overcoming their challenges as they go along. And then he has already given us all the tools. So we come in touch with pure devotional service, and we have an objective being set by the pure devotees of the Lord. The more we meditate on the objectives given by the parampara, the greater our chances of being aligned with Krishna's objectives. Now, once we have that particular objective, and we're also following the different, the tenets of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, which is Vidhi, which has been given by Lord Brahma, is specifically important because it purifies our senses in a very regulated way. We need to be regulated before we can be set free. Yeah. And the setting free part is also a natural occurrence. It is not engineered. It is not concocted. It is a particularly natural occurrence. Just as much as when we first come in touch with the movement, we are new devotees, as we would call ourselves, when we come in touch with the movement. And then slowly, steadily, there's a deeper level of faith. There's a deeper level of commitment. There are desires that come up in our heart of wanting to serve in certain ways. Then, as our desires become more and more sincere, Krishna, who is the super soul in the heart, he manifests himself as a guru. He inspires us. He inspires us through Siksha, Diksha, and then he practically brings us closer and closer to himself. And we particularly have so many different milestones. So in a similar fashion, transitioning from Vaidhi to Raganuga Marg is a transition, and it is a transition that need not be heavily managed. The transition occurs on its own, and then the devotee develops tendencies in terms of wanting to pursue deeper aspects of spontaneous devotion as they graduate from the influence of their senses. So the influence of the senses, nashta prayeshu abhadreshu, mode of ignorance and passion, as it becomes lesser, the sambandha gyan, or the identity of the devotee, becomes freed from illusion. Now, if you notice, Hiraṇyākṣa and Hiraṇyākṣipu, Sishupal, Dantavakra, Ravana and Kumbhakarna, these were Vaikuntha residents. Now, they forgot who they were. So the idea that we also need to get to the stage of being able to understand who we are, because the true sambandha has to come forth. The sambandha gyan has to come forth. We need to know who we are in relationship with Krishna. That occurs gradually as the senses become purified. For the senses to be purified, there needs to be regulated service. There has to be rules and regulations and regulated service. So one needs to accept the fact that Krishna would like us to approach formally until we develop a relationship that would allow us to approach him, in a deeper sense through the relationship itself. So true bhakti starts with sambandha, which is complete. Abhideya, which is bhakti, is nothing but service. Seva is bhakti. But then how do you serve if there is amnesia? How do you serve if there is no clarity in terms of what a relationship is? So there's a natural transition from Vaidhi Bhakti, which purifies and then slowly, steadily, we reach a point of nashta prayeshu abhadreshu. We have practically given up most of our tendencies. And then, as we have given up and our heart is clean, our true nature is revealed within the heart. Cheto darpanamarjanam, right? It is a chitta. Chitta is consciousness. The mirror of the heart is wiped clean by the holy name. And as the mirror of the heart is wiped clean, we are able to see ourselves. We are able to see ourselves, and we are also able to see Vrindavan, Krishna. So the heart of the devotee becomes Vrindavan. As the heart of the devotee becomes Vrindavan, the divine couple, they practically manifest each and every time the devotee is chanting Harinam. So each and every chant of Harinam, there's a manifestation of the divine couple. So the point I'm trying to make is that it is a natural transition, but then following the rules and regulations, whilst worshipping and whilst engaging in sadhana bhakti, eventually frees us from the influence of passion and ignorance, because we are trying to impose a discipline on us. The discipline is coming through the disciplic succession, and the discipline is being handed to us as disciples by the spiritual master. And as he disciplines us, and we accept the discipline upon our heads and become very diligent in being able to act out on the discipline, understanding that this is nothing but sweetness, it's just mercy, then one has the ability to move forward quite dramatically. So there's a distinction between imposing a certain discipline and approaching the Lord with discipline, which is needed. And then even if you approach him with discipline, there would be a lot of loving emotions that would start coming forth once someone reaches the stage of being able to receive and become what we would call as receptacles of that particular loving emotion. So this is to be very importantly understood by us. We have to understand that especially if you're not in a dham, and the reason why I'm saying this is because Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur singled out 5 important services. He said, Nama Kirtan, Sadhu Sangha. Then he said, Nama Kirtan, Nama Smaranam. Then we spoke of Bhagavat Shravanam, which is the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimurti Seva. And then you have the concept of living in the Dham and being able to participate in the Dham. So being in the Dham, if you are in the Dham, then it is an automatic function that you are in touch with spiritual potency, because this is non-different from the spiritual sky. It is not a theoretical statement. This is non-different from the spiritual sky. And as a consequence, there's constant endeavor all around us by devotees who are chanting. There are those who do parikrama. There are those who follow vratas. So there's constant inspiration, and our senses are not in touch with matter. They're not in touch. But that is not the case when you're not in the Dham. When you live outside, there's a need for regulated worship so that our senses come in touch with Krishna in a proper regulated way periodically. And as a consequence, we also have a lot of opportunity for service, and our senses become purified. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu. It is removed. The abhadreshu is removed. Then we have less and less influence of the senses. We have less and less influence of the modes of nature. And we are situated in pure goodness for most part. When we are situated in pure goodness, there's very little influence by the demons, or I would say influenced by negative forces. Consider this: as our consciousness rises, we are also rising along with the consciousness, and we are proceeding higher and higher in the hierarchy of the material sky. There are sages who are in Maharloka, Bhrigu. There are incarnations who go to Maharloka. It is basically the point being that the Maharloka is the first planetary system which is inhabited by great sages, where all the deities there are present, which means that all the avatars are manifest. It is practically there. Then there is Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka. The point being, as our mode of goodness increases and there's a reduced level of the influence of passion and ignorance, we are gradually coming in touch with higher strata of the material universe until we reach the point of being able to recognize who we are in Krishna's service. And at that point, when loving emotions begin in our heart, we are practically in the spiritual sky, because we are serving Krishna in the spiritual sky as he would want us. As it intensifies, the presence in the spiritual sky becomes even more profound. So it's a very gradual process. In reality, we are transitioning through different levels of the universe, transitioning through different lokas, and we're going higher and higher. And then we are basically getting an opportunity to practically serve him with deep faith as we go and transition higher and higher. Yeah. So this is very important for us to realize that this is basically a process that's been given. And when we come in touch with devotional service, we practically take care of everything. There isn't an extra endeavor for us to do in terms of simply pushing negativity away. There isn't. If you sincerely follow the tenets of devotional service, then the negativity is pushed away. And then we are able to move forward. Kavachas, like Narasimha Kavach, Sri Varaha Kavach, Narayana Kavach, most importantly, these are very, very powerful prayers that are to be done on a daily basis. And by doing so, this would protect us so that we stay aligned as we serve the Lord. It's very important for us to do these. Now, depending on our affinity, we could do any one of these, or we could do one of them, which we have, a greater level of familiarity with. But it is important. It is important for us to do this because we are interacting with the world, and the world is not designed to encourage devotional service. The world is designed to do the opposite. And because we are dealing with all these energies outside, it's important for us to add layers of protection so that we can continue our devotional service uninterrupted, so that we are able to render service day after day. So it's an important part. It should be an important part of our daily practice. One may ask, is it not sufficient if you just chant Harinam? Absolutely sufficient. Yes, if your faith is such that you are completely chanting Harinam, then it's just basically what you need. However, all the kavachas, even the appearance of Lord Narasimha was to protect the chanter of the holy name. The appearance of Lord Varaha was to do the same. He was practically wanting to appear to remove the influences that are negative. So the point being that chanting prayers that are associated with Lord Narasimha, Lord Varaha, it's practically required, or it is basically useful even for someone who is completely chanting and dedicating himself to the chanting of Harinam. Yeah, they are non-different. These are Narayana Rupas, Varaha, Narasimhadev, Lord Ram. These are non-different from Narayana. The other incarnations are expansions of Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. So there's a big difference between the two, where the qualities and the potency is almost similar. So this is Krishna in the formal kingdom, Varaha, Narasimha, and Sri Rama. This is Krishna in the formal Vaikuntha planets, as opposed to Krishna being in Dwaraka and Vrindavan Dham. So it's good for us to meditate on the killing of the demon Hiraṇyākṣa. I was just wanted to share a little bit of trivia so that we would know how this particular chapter is kind of timely for a day like this, which is somewhat problematic. All right, so I'm going to the chapters, chapter 19. Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the words of Brahma, the creator, which were free from all sinful purpose and as sweet as nectar, the Lord heartily laughed and accepted his prayer with a glance laden with love. The prayer of Lord Brahma is from the previous chapter. Lord Brahma is actually observing that the Lord is taking it a little bit easy. Now he becomes quite anxious because he is he is particularly familiar with the rules of the universe. So he's telling him that now Abhijit, which is basically the midpoint of the day, sunrise to sunset, you divide it by 2, is very auspicious because it is called the Muhurta, which is lauded by Hari himself. Yeah, Krishna himself lords the Muhurta, which is the midday Muhurta. It's a very auspicious Muhurta. Now, auspicious time, as we would call it. That had passed and it was about to finish. And then the inauspicious hours were going to begin. So Lord Brahma becomes very anxious because the rules of the material universe are followed by incarnations. Lord Narasimhadev had to follow the rules of the boon which Hiraṇyākṣa received. He had to appear as neither man nor beast. He had to kill him with no weapons that had either alive or dead. So he had to kill him with his nails. He had to be neither inside nor outside. All kinds of rules and regulations that were imposed by Hiraṇyākṣa. Lord Narasimha followed those rules and regulations and beat him even in his own game. So the point being that when incarnations appear, they follow rules. They don't overturn the rules of the universe. So Lord Brahma is reminding Lord Varahadev, saying, the inauspicious hour is approaching. The auspicious hour is almost done. Please end this. because Lord Brahma becomes anxious. The Lord, who had appeared from the nostril of Brahma, sprang and aimed his mace at the chin of his enemy, the Hiraṇyākṣa demon, who was stalking fearlessly before him. Struck by the demon's mace, however, the Lord's mace slipped from his hand and looked splendid as it fell down whirling. This was miraculous, for the mace was blazing wonderful. Even though the demon had an excellent opportunity to strike his unarmed foe without obstruction, he respected the law of single combat, thereby kindling the fury of the Supreme Lord. So this is also noteworthy. Noteworthy that even though he is a demon, he is practically stopping because he had practically moved his mace and knocked down the mace of the Supreme Lord. And because Krishna was unarmed, the demon stopped because he didn't want to hit someone who was unarmed. He's following the rules of combat. And this actually irritated the Lord. As the Lord's mace fell to the ground and a cry of alarm rose from the witnessing crowds of gods and rishis, the personality of God had acknowledged the demon's love of righteousness and therefore invoked his Sudarshana Chakra. As the discus began to revolve in the Lord's hands, and the Lord contended at close quarters with the chief of his Vaikuntha attendants, who had been born as Hiraṇyākṣa, a vile son of Diti, where there issued from every direction strange expressions uttered by those who were witnessing from airplanes. They had no knowledge of the Lord's reality, and they cried, "May victory attend you, pray dispatch him, play no more with him." So the demigods, most of them, had no knowledge of who Lord Varaha was because he was in the form of a boar. He was in the form of a boar. And his eyes, the lotus eyes, they were extraordinarily beautiful. And because of the extraordinary beauty of his lotus eyes, there were sages who recognized the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But he was in the form of a boar. So the demigods had no idea as to who this was, but they could see him fighting their foe, and as a consequence, they were trying to encourage him. Yeah. So what does this tell us? It means that the Lord's appearance and his activities are not granted an audience to everyone. Not everybody knows who he is. Yeah. So knowing him is not even the privilege of demigods. What to say of us in the human class? We are far, far below the strata in terms of our ability, or rather position in terms of importance in the administration of the overall scheme of things. So that the demigods didn't know who it was, most of them, not all of them, most of them. When the demon saw the personality of Godhead, who had eyes just like lotus petals, standing in position before him, armed with his Sudarshana discus, his senses were overpowered by indignation. He began to hiss like a serpent, and he bit his lip in great resentment. The demon, who had fearful tusks, stared at the personality of Godhead as though to burn him. Springing into the air, he aimed his mace at the Lord, exclaiming at the same time, "You are slain." O saintly Vidura, while his enemy looked on, the Lord in his boar form, the enjoyer of all sacrificial offerings, playfully knocked down the mace with his left foot, even as it came upon him with the force of a tempest. The Lord then said, "Take up your weapon and try again, eager as you are to conquer me." Challenged in these words, the demon aimed his mace at the Lord and once more loudly roared. When the Lord saw the mace flying towards him, he stood firmly where he was and caught it with the same ease as Garuda, the king of beasts, king of birds, would seize a serpent. His valor thus frustrated, the great demon felt humiliated and was put out of countenance. He was reluctant to take back the mace when it was offered by the personality of Godhead. He now took a trident which was as rapacious as a flaming fire and hurled it against the Lord, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, even as one would use penance for a malevolent purpose against a holy Brahmana. Hurled by the mighty demon with all his strength, the flying trident shone brightly in the sky. The personality of Godhead, however, tore it to pieces with his discus Sudarshana, which had sharp-edged rim, even as Indra cut off a wing of Garuda. Now, Indra, Lord Garuda, is an expansion of Ananta. This is basically how the order is. Krishna expands into Ananta, Ananta expands into different aspects. Shri Garuda is an expansion. He is not to be considered merely as a vehicle, as a vahana. Garuda, he is the personification of the most confidential hymns of the Samaveda. What does it mean? It essentially means that the Samaveda hymns, which are most confidential, they eulogize the Lord and have the ability to invoke bhakti in the hearts of those who recite them. And what happens when that is recited with deep bhakti? The Lord manifests in the heart of the devotee. Sri Garuda also performs the same task of bringing the Lord to wherever his devotees are. So he is a personification of the most confidential hymns of the Samaveda that glorify the Lord. So he is called a Vedamurti. He is practically someone who has the ability to, what I would call as give bhakti, because he's practically carrying the Lord into the heart of the devotee. So he carries the Lord wherever the devotees are. So he is playing the same role as Shastra. He is practically bringing the Lord and giving sambandha to the devotees. So he is the personification of the most confidential aspects of Samaveda. So there's no difference between him and the Lord. He is the same in the sense that he is an expansion. So he practically wanted to save his mother from the curse of his stepmother, Kadru, and he went and stole the pot of nectar from Indra. And the king of heavens, Indra, struck Garuda with a wing. And Garuda just wanted the king of heavens to have a certain sense of victory, so he didn't challenge him. He allowed the wing to drop, but then he brought the pot of nectar back. Yeah. So in other words, this is similarly, Krishna, he just allows the demon to reciprocate and play with him, even though he could have killed him right away. So Sri Garuda is far superior to any demigod, far. He's an expansion. Yeah. So we have to understand that that is the conclusion of Shastra. Then you can read about it in the Narayana Kavach, you can read about it in so many other places where he's not different. He's practically, even though we understand him from the perspective of he's a mount, but he isn't. He is non-different because he is an expansion. He is a personification of the most confidential hymns of the Samaveda. In the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, one of the most prominent acharyas who came after Ramanujacharya, the most prominent, his name was Vedanta Desikan. He practically is responsible for an extraordinary body of literature which the Sri Vaishnavas follow, very bona fide. Now, he was initiated into a mantra of Lord Hayagriva by Sri Garuda. How was the initiation done? He chanted the mantras of Garuda. And while he chanted the mantras of Sri Garuda appeared and flapped his wings. As he was flapping his wings, the mantra of Lord Hayagriva came manifest through the sound vibrations of the wings of Garuda. He initiated this great personality, this great acharya, into the mantra that is associated with Yoga Hayagriva. This mantra practically allowed the great personality, the acharya, the disciplic succession of Sri Ramanujacharya, to offer a wealth of literature of bhakti, a wealth, literally. His commentaries were extraordinary. So there is history of him appearing and initiating through the flapping of his wings, because the sound vibrations are mantric as well. Yeah, quite interesting. The demon was enraged when his trident was cut to pieces by the discus of the personality of God. He therefore advanced towards the Lord and, roaring aloud, struck his hard fist against the Lord's broad chest, which bore the mark of Srivatsa. Then he went out of sight. So he actually struck Krishna. It's quite amazing that Krishna allowed him to really come and hit him on the chest. Hit in this manner by the demon, O Vidura, the Lord, who had appeared as the first bull, Adivaraha, did not feel the least quaking in any part of his body, any more than an elephant would when struck by a wreath of flowers. The demon, however, employed many conjuring tricks against the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of Yogamaya. At the sight of this, the people were filled with alarm and thought that the dissolution of the universe was near. Fierce winds began to blow from all directions, spreading darkness occasioned by dust and hailstorms. Stones came in volleys from every corner as if thrown by machine guns. Yeah. When Srila Prabhupada writes machine guns, he's translating a particular word here. Essentially, he is talking about an automated, what I would call as a yantra, which has the capacity to throw stones. So the luminaries in the outer space disappeared due to the sky being overcast with masses of clouds, which were accompanied by lightning and thunder. The sky rained pus, hair, blood, stool, urine, and bones. All of these are going to increase the tamas. The sky raining, all of this was a mystical phenomenon conjured by the demon. And this was to increase tamas, because as you increase tamas, then his strength increases. And then he would be able to empower his followers because they thrive in tamas. They don't thrive in the mode of goodness, they thrive in tamas. So the tamas increasing essentially would empower demoniac forces. O sinless Vidura, mountains discharged weapons of various kinds, and naked demonesses armed with tridents appeared with their hair hanging loose. Women with hair hanging loose, shastrically, is an extraordinarily inauspicious circumstance. It is not considered auspicious at all. That is why there's a specific mention here of hair hanging loose, and these are demonesses who are also throwing off their clothes, which are phenomenon which are quite prevalent in the modern, I would say, world, where there is basically what I would call as a circumstance of the people, there's a circumstance of this kind of a phenomenon where there's a lack of understanding of how to dress. There's also a lack of understanding of being auspicious. So that's why this is being mentioned here. O sinless Vidura, mountains discharged weapons of various kinds, and naked demonesses armed with tridents appeared with their hair hanging loose. Cruel and savage slogans were uttered by hosts of ruffian yakshas and rakshasas, who all either marched on foot or rode on horses, elephants, or chariots. The Lord, the personal enjoyer of all sacrifices, now discharged his beloved Sudarshana, which was capable of dispersing the magical forces displayed by the demon. Yeah. The Lord's discus, Sudarshana, the personification, is also non-different from him. It is Mahavishnu in the spiritual sky, which is Mahakala himself. He is a personification of Narasimhadev, the Sudarshana discus. But in the material sky, it is a combination of Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati. Yeah. Mahakala in the material sky, who is a servant of Krishna, of Narasimhadev, is Lord Shiva. So the discus, when it wants to destroy material nature, when it wants to uproot, and when it wants to kill demons here, is a personification of the potency of Lord Shiva. In the spiritual sky, he is the personification of the Lord himself in certain ways. Yeah. So there's a lot of literature which basically is being produced. Very specifically, it is called the Ahir Budnya Samhita. Ahir Budnya is one of the 11 Rudras who appear from Ananta, but he is the primary Rudra. He is the first Rudra who appears. He's Shiva himself. This Ahir Budnya has written the Ahir Budnya Samhita. And the Ahir Budnya Samhita is a treatise, or it is particularly the greatest, I would say, combination of all the, I would say, verses, mantras, performance, yajna procedures for performing fire sacrifice for Narasimhadev and for Sudarshana. All Sudarshana Narasimha, the whole procedure for performing yajna has come from Lord Shiva. And his name is Ahir Budnya. He is a great Mahabhagavata. There's a very famous prayer called the Mantra Raja Pada Stotram. This was composed by Ahir Budnya. Now, this is also part of connection. There's a connection to the Ahir Budnya Samhita. The Mantra Raja Pada Stotra, it has verses which have taken syllables of the Ugram Veeram Mahavishnu, the most famous Anushtuk mantra of Lord Narasimha. The 32 aksharas have been hidden in the Mantra Raja Pada Stotram. So we are not qualified to chant the Ugram Veeram Mahavishnu because it's a very potent prayer, but we can easily get the benefit by chanting the Mantra Raja Pada Stotra. This Mantra Raja Pada Stotra has been authored by Lord Shiva, who is Ahir Budnya, who is responsible for all the procedures for worshipping Lord Narasimha. So Sudarshana himself here is Kala, which is material time. And material time here is Lord Shiva. He is practically the destroyer of the universe when the time comes. The destruction occurs due to the agency of Lord Shiva. But in the spiritual sky, just as much as Krishna expanded into Lord Shiva, there's a personification of Lord Shiva in the spiritual sky, which is Sadashiva. That personality is equivalent to Sudarshana. Yeah. So the Sudarshana is also non-different. So it is basically the connection between the Lord and his weapons. Everything is personal and everything is non-different. As we say, everything is non-different. So this is in reality being explained. So this can be learnt more in the 9th canto, where Ambarish Maharaj is being protected by the Sudarshana discus and Sudarshana Chakra. So when Ambarish Maharaj is being protected by Sudarshana Chakra, there's a prayer that is being offered by Ambarish Maharaj in the 9th canto, and that prayer particularly glorifies the Sudarshana Chakra as being non-different. Yeah, it is non-different. So in traditions where the worship of Krishna in Vaikuntha is prominent, so I'm referring to the Sri Sampradaya, there's a deeper understanding of Garuda, there's a deeper understanding of the disc of the Lord, which is Sudarshana. There's a deeper understanding of his Vaikuntha opulence. But in our tradition, we focus on the sweetness of Braja. So we generally don't go into great detail on the Vaikuntha personification of Sudarshana and the presence of Garuda, etc. But all of this can be learned from different Samhitas and different Puranas, and even from Srimad Bhagavatam in different sections. The Lord, the personal enjoyer of all sacrifices, now discharged his beloved Sudarshana, which was capable of dispersing the magical forces displayed by the demons. At the very moment, a shudder ran through the heart of Diti, the mother of Hiraṇyākṣa. She recalled the words of her husband Kashyapa, and blood flowed from her breasts. The mother, milk is a form of blood, which is a transformation of blood, which occurs in the breast. When the mother wants to nurture progeny, Divine Mother, when she wants to nurture the entire universe, it is done through her propensity of wanting to feed and nurture. And so there are many prayers that particularly are glorifying her ability to nurture through playing the role of a mother. But the same milk, when she is in great fear of losing the progeny, now Diti is going to lose her son. Even though he's demoniac, mother has no eyes, you see, in the sense that she can't really distinguish when it comes to children. So she is actually in agitation to such an extent that instead of milk, you see, now blood is coming out. It is, we can read in the Bhagavatam, when the cows see Krishna, milk spontaneously comes from the udder of the cows because they feel this tendency of wanting to nurture, feed him, serve him. So now blood is coming because she practically is in great anxiety. Though struck indifferently by the Lord, the conqueror of all, the demon's body began to wheel. His eyeballs bulged out of their sockets, his arms and legs broken, and the hair on his head scattered. He fell down dead like a gigantic tree uprooted by the wind. What did Krishna do as Lord Varaha? He stuck him under his ear. He practically boxed him. He boxed him under his ear, and that took the life force out. So he was actually playing with him until then. And then he boxes him so that the life force is now gone. And then he falls down dead. Aja, Brahma, and others arrived at on the spot to see the fearfully tusked demon lying on the ground, biting his lip. The glow of his face was yet unfaded, and Brahma admiringly said, "Oh, who could meet such blessed death?" It was quite unusual. It is quite unusual, and Krishna is so personal that he did not allow anything else to interfere. He wanted to personally kill Jaya and Vijaya. Extraordinarily personal. So he did not allow anything else. He did not basically dispatch them through other means. He very specifically wanted to kill them personally. So this is very, very important for us to understand as well, that he is so personal in this particular activity of wanting to engage with his devotees. Aja and others arrived, and then they were wondering, how could someone have met such a wonderful death? Because he was stuck by the feet of Krishna. Everybody is meditating on the feet of Krishna. Krishna actually kicked this fellow behind his ear and killed him. And this is such a glorious death, which is only awarded to great devotees. Brahma continued, he was struck by a forefoot of the Lord, whom yogis seeking freedom from their unreal material bodies meditate upon in seclusion and mystic trance. While gazing on his countenance, this crest jewel of Diti's sons has cast off his mortal coil. These two personal assistants of the Supreme Lord have been cursed, have been destined to take birth in demoniac families. After a few such births, they will return to their own positions. The demigods address the Lord, all obeisances unto you. You are the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and you assume the form of a boar in pure goodness for the purpose of maintaining the world. Fortunately for us, the demon who was a torment to the worlds has been slain by you, and we too, O Lord, are now at ease in devotion at your lotus feet. Sri Maitreya continued, after killing the most formidable demon, Hiraṇyākṣa, the Supreme Lord Hari, the origin of the boar species, returned to his own abode where there's always an uninterrupted festival. The Lord was praised by all the demigods, headed by Brahma. Now, Sri Maitreya, let me see how many, just a few more verses, just a few more. Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, I have explained to you the personality of God as coming down as the first boar incarnation and killing in a great fight a demon of unprecedented prowess as if he were just a plaything. This has been narrated by me as I heard it from my predecessor, spiritual master. So this is the potency. The potency of Srimad Bhagavatam is that someone has witnessed Sri Varaha's appearance, and they have recorded and passed on that experience through sound vibration to their disciple. Then from one disciple to another, it's being narrated, and they're capturing the sound vibration, which is full of realization of the original appearance of the Lord, and they're passing on. So the potency of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the disciplic succession is so powerful that it can practically uproot all kinds of inauspiciousness. Sri Sutta Goswami continued, my dear Brahmana, Vidura, the great devotee of the Lord, achieved transcendental bliss by hearing this narration of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the authoritative source of the sage Maitreya, and he was very pleased. What to speak of hearing the pastimes of the Lord, whose chest is marked with Srivatsa? People may take transcendental pleasure even in hearing of the works and deeds of the devotees whose fame is immortal. The personality of Godhead delivered the king of elephants, who was attacked by an alligator and who meditated upon the lotus feet of the Lord. At that time, the female elephants who accompanied him were crying, and the Lord saved them from impending danger. What grateful soul is there who would not render his loving service to such a great master as the personality of Godhead? The Lord can be easily pleased by spotless devotees who resort exclusively to him for protection, though the unrighteous man finds it difficult to propitiate him. O Brahmanas, anyone who hears, chants, or takes pleasure in the wonderful narration of the killing of the Hiraṇyākṣa demon by the Lord, who appeared as the first boar in order to deliver the world, is at once relieved of the results of sinful activities, even the killing of a Brahmana. This is a Phala Shruti. Every prayer has a Phala Shruti, that if you hear this, then you will have this particular benefit. So this Phala Shruti is very important, because if you're very sincere, then this is like a blessing which is being given. Okay? So initially there is an invocation in the beginning of auspiciousness, the Mangala Charana, then there is the Phala Shruti, which is done by the Acharyas. So you will read it oftentimes in the prayers of Raghunath Das Goswami Pad, you will read it in the prayers of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, you will read it all the personal prayers. In the end, they would say that whoever reads this very sincerely would receive this particular benefit. It's actually very important. If you're very sincere, then the benefit comes. Okay, now we are in the last verse. This most sacred narrative confers extraordinary merit, wealth, fame, longevity, and all the objects of one's desire. On the field of battle, it promotes the strength of one's vital organs and organs of action. One who listens to it at the last moment of his life is transferred to the supreme abode of the Lord, O dear Shaunaka. So this is Sutta Goswami talking to Shaunaka. Now, yeah, this is just an extraordinary, and it is a very extraordinary experience. When we come next to Vrindavan, you should visit the Varahadev temple in Mathura. It is on Vishram Ghat. After this battle, the Lord goes to Vishram Ghat. Vishram means he is taking some rest. So he goes to Vishram Ghat and on the banks of Yamuna, and he's getting some rest. But there's an ancient temple in the top of the hill. It's being managed by families, and it is a Shweta Varaha, and there's Adi Varaha as well. Shweta Varaha Mandir is basically the white colored Varahadev. It is extraordinary, very potent, extraordinarily potent. So next time you come, you must visit and take, blessings. And there you could read the Bhagavatam verses about the appearance of Lord Varaha and derive complete benefit in basically in this particular the avatar himself. The Lord is so merciful that everything has been arranged for the devotees. So we just need to come in touch with them wanting to serve, and everything else just gets taken care of automatically. So I'm going to stop here and I'll take a few questions if you have any. I think there are some questions on Chant. Yeah, there are questions on Chant. Is Varaha Kavach is more powerful than Narasimha Kavach? Can both be chanted daily? We don't want to distinguish. Lord Varaha and Lord Narasimha are the same. This is the opinion of personalities, that they are the same because they appeared to kill Hiraṇyākṣa and Hiraṇyākṣipu, the brothers. Then Lord Ram appeared. He killed, Kumbhakarna and Ravana, or Ravana and Kumbhakarna, sorry. Then Krishna appears. He kills Shishupal and Dantavakra. So initially, these two personalities, Lord Varaha and Lord Narasimha, they appear for these two brothers. So they're considered the same. So there is no difference. It depends on what you want to chant, but you can chant one in the morning, one in the night. It depends. Can they both be chanted? Absolutely. What is the best time to recite? As there's always negativity around, it is very negative in Amavasya Tithi. If someone leaves the body, then what would be the destination? These are specifics. These are specifics based on, the departure of people. In general, what happens is Amavasya, which is today, and Saturdays, they are very heavy on the people who are sick. And as a consequence, in general, if they're struggling and these are the last few days, they tend to depart today. So it's a heavy day to depart. So I wouldn't classify this or be able to give information in general on departures because they're as specific as birth. They're very different. What is a good time to chant Kavach mantras? You can start in the morning and you can also chant. There are the three sandhis. The sandhi in the morning is the sunrise, sandhi in the afternoon, and then there's sandhi in the evening. The three sandhis you could chant. So you could choose the sandhis and you could basically chant. You could chant Lord Varaha's Kavacha in the morning. You could chant Lord Narasimha's Kavacha in the evening. Yeah, so this could be done. Okay. Okay, there's a specific question. During the passing over of a loved one, even though we may be absorbed in teachings to the best of our abilities, the event still makes everything lose its meaning. Although it may be a temporary, intense dispassion with life experiencing the death of a close one, is there anything in particular that can help with dealing with the passing on process of life given in Krishna consciousness? There are multiple ways to overcome this particular unfortunate experience. And Krishna acknowledges the fact that the human experience is an emotional one. So it is not so much that we can suppress emotions and we can be inert. In reality, if there is grief, then we are overcome by such grief because that's the nature of being a human being. And Arjuna cried piteously at the passing of Abhimanyu, even though Krishna was just right there with his hand on his shoulder. It was just basically Krishna's presence was there, but he cried. But what is important as a matter of principle is for us to ensure that we are able to continue the process of Krishna consciousness with great diligence, even if there is a circumstance of being overcome by such experiences. So that's the first principle. The second is that there are many ways to overcome this. Perhaps you could reach out to me on directly, because I don't want to digress from the topic. So if you could just write me on WhatsApp, and I would be happy to share things. Now the next one is Ugram Veeram. Ugram Veeram is just that verse, is sometimes chanted prior to Harinam. So shouldn't we do? It is not a verse, it is the Mahamantra during a particular yuga. Just as we have the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Ugram Veeram Mahavishnu, the 32 syllable mantra, is particularly connected to Lord Narasimhadev. It is a manifestation of Narasimhadev. The 32 syllables denote that Lord Narasimha, when he appears, he controls the Kala, which is practically his Mahakala. He is practically removing obstacles in the entire existence, and he's removing and altering time to facilitate the devotees of the, who are chanting. And so when the Lord appears, the 32 syllables, in reality, the Nasimho Tapani Upanishad refers to the 32 syllables and gives different meanings for each and every syllable as to whom that syllable's potency is. So Krishna appears with the sum total of all these potencies because he is the origin of all the demigods, and he appears with all these potencies in that particular verse. So is it to be chanted? We can chant the Namaste Narasimhaya prayers of Srila Prabhupada, and it is an extraordinarily powerful prayer. Whatever Srila Prabhupada has given us, Namaste Narasimhaya, we should just chant that. It's an extraordinary prayer. And I'm not discouraging the chanting of Ugram Veeram. It is just that the Ugram Veeram verse is the manifestation of Narasimhadev, and it needs to be dealt with very carefully because the vidhi and the rules and regulations for it are very different. Yeah, for Namaste Narasimhaya can be chanted by anyone. Now, the other question is, do we need to observe the restrictions for an eclipse, such as not eating during the time, if the eclipse is not visible from where we are? The answer is that if the eclipse is not visible, we don't follow rules. Yeah, but if the eclipse is visible, it's extraordinarily important because there's a marked difference in the atmosphere. I remember in South India once, I was going to a particular kshetra, a temple, and it was the middle of the day. That was when the solar eclipse. The moment the eclipse started, I could just feel, even me and even the person who was driving my car, he could feel that there was a very heavy influence where there was this tamas was coming in, and it was starting to give us a very heavy headache. So there's a very profound effect during an eclipse if it is going to manifest in the region where we are in. But if it is not, then what we do is we basically don't have to worry about it. Lord Varaha is worshipped to counter the influence of Rahu. Who should we worship to counter the negative influence of Shani, apart from Shani himself? My understanding is that we all come under the influence of Shani. 7 years, several times in our lives. Does the extent to which negative planets' influence affect us depend on the past current karma? The last question, does it depend on the past current karma? The answer is yes. They are practically simply enforcing what is karmic. However, we do not want to pick these 9 planets because we are engaging in a transcendental process. The transcendental process, Krishna, he practically is the origin of all the avatars. He is the origin of everybody, including the demigods, the planetary demigods themselves. So what we want to do is to have a Kavach mantra, such as the Varaha Kavach or the Narasimha Kavach. And we want to chant the Narayana Kavach, etc., for the purpose of ensuring that we are not influenced adversely to the point where we give up devotional service and move away, and we are protected. So our chanting is basically for the purpose of encouraging and being able to allow us to participate, what I would call as in devotional service. So we don't want to pick Shani, we don't want to pick Saturn, we don't want to pick Rahu. We don't want to do that. And the reason for my mentioning Rahu today was because it was a coincidence that the 9 planets are associated with 9 different, the 10 planets are associated, 9 plus 1. The 10th planet is the ascendant, that is Kalki avatar. But then 9 planets are associated with different avatars of the Lord. And amongst those, Lord Varaha is attributed or connected to Rahu. And Hiraṇyākṣa represents Rahu, where he wants to devour everything beyond a need for any kind of definition of capacity. He's just practically wanting to be all devouring, basically greedy to the point of extraordinary greed. So the point is that I was wanting to simply highlight that today is Amavasya, which is a new moon day. It is also a solar eclipse. And all of these have a very close connection to this particular planet. And we are reading about the slaying of Hiraṇyākṣa, who is the personification of the negativity that is being described. So I was wanting to merely highlight the what I would call as the situation. However, to answer your question, we don't pick planets. You should pick the Varaha Kavach, Narasimha Kavach, or Narayana Kavach, whatever pleases you in terms of the scripture, in terms of the writing, the inspiration, whatever inspires you. If you do it on a daily basis, then we are protected. That there need be no extra endeavor to fix this. In my own personal experience, when someone goes through these 7.5 years of Saturn, we call it Sade Sati, 7.5 years. If you're chanting Harinam, you're fully protected, because Shastrically, it is the names of Krishna which are an antidote for all issues contained with Shani. It is the names of Krishna. So we don't have to do an extra endeavor to fix this and fix that. We just need to ensure that we're able to follow the precepts of devotional service. There are some cases of some of us who have certain specific issues that we're trying to overcome. In those circumstances, we may want to engineer and we want to come at a solution which is a little bit more specific. But then from a broad application, if you were to simply chant the Kavach and then you'll be able to worship Srila Prabhupada as Guru Puja, especially, and worship the deities and worship and chant Harinam and read Srimad Bhagavatam, you're done. You don't need to do anything more than that, because that is pretty much it. So what is our principle? Our principle is we do all of this and then we accept life as arranged by Krishna. Trinadapi sunichena tarori vasahishnuna. Amani manadena kirtane sadahari. So the acceptance of life as arranged by Krishna is done after diligently doing everything that we're supposed to do in devotional service. Then we accept that Krishna, you are there, you're looking at me. This is something that you arranged very specifically to bring me closer to you. So I accept this arrangement with all my heart. This particular circumstance of accepting the arrangement made by the Lord, accepting each day as being arranged by the Lord, even if such a day is dreadful from the perspective of experiences, would practically make the day extraordinarily auspicious, because He who is in the heart will give us intelligence to understand why such a thing is happening to us. And that would bring us closer to Him. We will be able to process events in life quite carefully if we come in touch with that kind of an attitude. So our combination is do everything which is there in devotional service, and then chant the Trinadapi Sunichena Tarori Vasaishnuna Amani Manadena Kirtane Sadahari. So we become extraordinarily focused in accepting the arrangements of the Lord. Even though this is our karma, we accept it. This is called surrender. And when we are surrendered, we keep accepting what Krishna is giving us and saying that this is your arrangement, then what happens is it becomes His arrangement. If you accept it. It's like taking an apple from the market, bringing it to Krishna. The apple is just matter, but you bring it to Krishna, you offer it with devotion. Apple now becomes spirit, because it's become prasadam. It's potent. So in a similar fashion, we need to be able to offer ourselves and submit ourselves on a daily basis, accepting that the arrangements made by Him, these are arrangements that are being made by Him, even though we're going through some difficulty. What would happen is that we would receive the intelligence and the help for us to be able to move forward. So in reality, we don't want to get too caught up in planning based on karma. We want to get up and we want to be able to plan based on what is most important for devotional service. So I was just wanting to give a perspective that one needs to do that. Does it mean that we need to ignore or we don't need to know anything about what our future is? Not necessarily. It can be a matter of understanding how material nature works and what is in store and what can be done. But it is a part of a perspective. It is information. But in reality, what is going to save us is going to be the chanting of Harinam. It is going to be the following of the principles of devotion, such as reading Srimad Bhagavatam, associating, service, worshipping the deity. This is basically what we do. Yeah, and this is very important. This is all we need in one sense. All right. Is there any other question that I could address? All right. So I think we'll call it quits for the day, and we'll meet again next week. Oh, I see a question. So let me just see if. Okay, so there's a request for sharing the Varaha Kavach in the group. I would be happy to share the Varaha Kavach. I have a transliteration. I also have a Sanskrit Devanagari. So I will share both, and we could take it from there. So wish everybody a wonderful week ahead, and we'll get in touch. I plan to start Bhagavad Gita and Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that would become 3 sessions in a week. I'm trying to figure out what is the best way to do this, and I will get back to you. But I'm very much wanting to do this because it brings in a certain discipline in me for me to come in touch regularly with the scripture. And I'm hoping to serve the devotee community the same way. But I will get back to you on this. So thank you very much for taking the time and joining, and then have a very safe week ahead. Wish you the very best.